A few years ago, I made a video about why my dating life in Newfoundland failed. And let's just say that since then, there has been a few changes made. I got married. And so I thought it would be great for me to do a follow up video. It's been over a year now since I've been married. So I said, why not do a follow up talking about the differences in my dating experience since I moved to Toronto, how I went from dating to being in a serious relationship to eventually being married. But the focal point of the video is going to be exploring the topic of intercultural relationships because we don't talk about it enough. So let's get into the video. What up everyone, CharisMaggietv here and welcome to my channel. Welcome. If you are new, thank you for tuning in. Fair warning y'all, this is not a relationship based channel. I'm just a girl who likes to talk about things related to culture, and from time to time I will talk about my own lived experience. And for this particular video, because we're talking about differences in cultures, tradition, things like that, and how that is important to relationships, specifically romantic relationships and how they can work, I just wanted to share my personal experience. So yes, that disclaimer is out there. All right, cool. So I also want to give another disclaimer that I'm talking from my own personal experience. Whatever I mention or reference from the older video that I did is based on what I experienced. This might not be what everyone has gone through. And so please keep that in mind when you're watching this video as well. So let me take you down memory lane a little bit as to what I mainly talked about in my last video when I talked about my dating experience in Newfoundland. So when I moved to Newfoundland, I went there as an international student. So I was about 20 years old when I moved there. So one of the issues or challenges I talked about was how difficult it was to really date because most of the people I went to school with were coming right out of high school. So they were mostly like 18, 19 years old. And as someone who was about to be 21 soon at the time, there was a bit of an age gap. And so with age gap came with different life experiences, different level of maybe maturity even. So that was one of the things I talked about, age gap. The second thing was because I was a university student, the settings that I was meeting people at might not be the most conducive environment for when you're thinking about getting into a relationship with someone or the right place to meet people where they can make a great impression. So I was mostly meeting people at house parties when we went to like the club, or if it was like a potluck, whatever, like activity on school grounds. Basically, most of the people I was meeting was at school. I don't remember if I mentioned it in my last video, but I did try out dating apps for a while, mainly Tinder, and never again is what I would say. I did not have a lot of luck with being on dating apps, and just really what Tinder was about. It's not necessarily the app if you are looking for a serious relationship. It was more of a hookup app, which I found out after the fact. Yeah. And the last thing I mentioned was just the difference in cultural experiences. Most of the people I did have the opportunity to go out with on dates and things like that were mainly people from different cultures, mainly from Newfoundland, and so they were mostly white guys. And from my experience, it just kind of felt like sometimes there were issues of being low key like fetishized. They probably didn't realize it, but that's how it came off. Another thing I also talked about was how quickly things could move from you meeting someone to them wanting to introduce you to family, even if it wasn't a very serious relationship just yet. And in my culture, that was not the norm. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention in that video is that I had decided to take a break from dating for the last 2 years of my university studies because I realized that, you know what, I knew for sure that I did not want to stay in Newfoundland long term. And so it wouldn't make sense for me to continue to date someone or get close to someone there, knowing that they had a desire to stay. So there's a quick recap for you. So let's quickly talk about what my dating experience was like when I moved to Ontario, specifically Toronto. And I want to quickly kind of touch on differences I realized with my dating experience in both Ontario and Newfoundland, with maybe some similarities I experienced as well. So the first thing is that there was a bit more diversity in Toronto. Naturally, it is like one of the most diverse cities. You can go down the road, you find a Caribbean restaurant, then you can find an Ethiopian restaurant, then you can find an African restaurant. Like very close to each other on the same block kind of a thing, working with people of different cultures as well. So there was just a lot more diversity. Whereas my experience when I was living in Newfoundland was that most of the people I did meet who were of different backgrounds were also international students like me. They came to the province specifically for school. And so I would say not that I didn't feel like I didn't belong when I was in Newfoundland, but I just felt a bit more like I fit when I was living in Toronto, just because there are certain questions that you're not going to be asked all the time, like where are you really from and things like that. I feel like it was just like a norm to expect there to be a lot of diversity and to meet people of different backgrounds and things like that. And so you didn't get certain questions. At least that was my personal experience. Again, I'm speaking from my experience. And so you didn't really stick out like a sore thumb compared to what I could remember with when I was living in Newfoundland. So that was one big difference. The second difference was there were just a lot more options when it came on to exploring, dating, and just being able to meet people. So whereas the settings that I had, because at the time too, I want to remember the fact that I was a student. So most of the people I was meeting would also be students. It would be in settings where I would be meeting other students as well. And so the options were also very different. I was introduced to other types of dating apps that were available. Bumble was one of them that I used for the most part. And the reason I wanted to use that app is because it allowed me that when I matched with someone, I had to reach out to the guy to start a conversation versus them reaching out to me, which I preferred, kind of me being able to allow whoever I wanted to speak to me versus you kind of have someone reach out to you that you were not that interested in, kind of a deal. The ball was more in the woman's court. So that's what I liked about that app. And yeah, it just gave you a bit more control of your dating experience in that way. So I had a lot more opportunities in that way to basically meet people at events. There were different apps to use as well. I think for a short period, I tried out the Facebook dating app as well. I won't even talk about that one. But I felt like, in terms of the difference, even though there were more options in Toronto, it could also get very overwhelming. So there was a point in time where I kind of also paused because it was just getting too much. And then the thing that I would say I noticed that was similar between both of the experiences I had was my experience overall as a Black woman. I would say that I found that I would be mostly approached by white guys when I lived in Newfoundland. There's this thing in Caribbean culture, I don't know if it's still relevant today, but thankfully I didn't grow up with parents who are like that. But there are a lot of people who are grown with that mentality of when you move to foreign, you should make sure that you date up. So dating a white person, you're not going to go abroad to go date another Black person or someone from basically the same country. So especially for guys, that is usually pushed on them for them to marry up. And so I had guys from similar Caribbean cultures as me who were pretty vocal to me about not dating Black women. I'm like, okay, cool. And so most of the options I did have were white guys who were interested in actually dating me. With Toronto, it wasn't as direct in that way, but you could tell that even if they were interested in Black women, there was a specific kind of Black woman they were interested in. So you had to be like super racially like ambiguous, like kind of looking, the one with the more curly texture hair, the one with the more caramel type skin. That is what I would say I had experienced when it came on to dating anyone who was from a similar background as myself. So now that I've talked about the similarities and the differences, how did I eventually get to meet my now husband, and what was that experience or that journey was? Was there any struggles or challenges to get to that point? Now, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I actually knew my husband from when I was living in Jamaica. So, this is where we are gonna be talking about intercultural relationships. And so, very quickly, what are intercultural relationships is basically relationships between people who are from different cultures. Now, the thing about intercultural relationships is that you could be from the same culture. For example, you could be from an Asian culture, but you're from different countries. So, someone who is from Taiwan versus someone who's from Thailand. In our case, even though we are both from Caribbean cultures, I was born in Guyana raised by Haitian parents in Jamaica, and he is Jamaican. So similarities culturally, but we definitely have some differences within our culture as well. But I think that with me living in Jamaica for most of my life, it allowed me to have that like relatability to my husband. So it made it very simple in the beginning for us when we did start to date. So, yes, spoiler alert, I knew my husband from when I was in Jamaica in probably the last year and a half of me living in Jamaica. We were not super close or anything. We were introduced through mutual friends, started talking to each other on Facebook, but it was always purely just very friend zone vibe. We would talk sometime on Skype when I moved to Belize. Eventually, when I moved to Canada as well, we would check in once in a while with each other. But I remembered it was the year before I was supposed to graduate, there was a conference that I got the opportunity to come to in Toronto, and for some reason at the same time he was coming to school as well during that year. And so we had pretty much just made plans for us to be able to meet up. This would be the very first person since I left Jamaica that I would be able to make a connection with again in person since I had left Jamaica so many years ago. This was about maybe 7 years since I had left Jamaica at that point. So I was excited to be able to catch up with someone, a familiar face, all of that. And I remember from that interaction, I just was so nervous. And that made me realize, okay, there is like something here that I wasn't really aware of at the time. But I did realize I had an attraction to him. And I remember when I went back to Newfoundland and I was like talking to some of my closest friends about the trip. And I told them, I'm like, yeah, like I think I found my husband and he's in Toronto. This is long before I had already decided that I was also going to already move to Toronto, which would have happened the year after. And so it was just kind of funny how I foreshadowed like this moment, I guess you could say. So, moved to Toronto, no intentions of dating, but he was one of the first persons that I reconnected with when I did move to Toronto. We hung out a lot. He helped me with like moving and things like that. And we just really enjoyed each other's company, but it was really just that. Eventually, while I was simultaneously, going on dates, getting to know other guys through being on the Bumble app, I realized that even though a lot of these guys were nice, some of them were horrible dates, I wasn't really feeling any of it. There wasn't any one that gave me that butterfly in my stomach kind of feeling. But whenever I was with him, I did feel that over and over. So there was one time we were like just hanging out, and I told him like, you know what, we've been hanging out for a while. What would you say this is? And that conversation went from, you know what, I like you, you like me. There's obviously an attraction here. Let's explore this and see where it goes from here. And that eventually led into us dating, to us being in a serious relationship. Now, without telling out all of my business, because the internet never forgets, what I will say is we were able to move smoothly through our relationship because there were so many things that we were aligned on and that we basically could relate on. And even though there are certain things that we align on or we like the same things or whatever, I love the fact that we are also still two very different people in our own way. I am more of an extrovert, whereas he is more of an introvert. Like he's very introverted, but once you get to know him, he really can open up. You see his joking side, his goofy side. But yeah, I love the fact that we balance out each other as well. I can admit that I'm more on the anxious, worrisome side. Like I can stress about things very easily at times, whereas he is more of a keeping it cool, calm, and collected type of person. And I like that he has that to balance me. But also, I am more outspoken and talk about things that I don't like. Whereas he sometimes might not be more like so vocal about what he likes and what he doesn't like. So if we go out to a restaurant and he got the wrong order, he is more likely to just stick with the order, to not let people go through the trouble. But I'm like going to be like, oh, like I think that, this is the wrong order. Can we actually get what he ordered? Because this is not what he ordered, like actually making he got what he ordered. He is happy to just sit down with it. I'm like, no, babe, we're not about to pay for something that you didn't order, okay? So balance. I feel like because of the similar Caribbean cultural background that we had, even though we were from different countries or had different cultural backgrounds, like me being from a Guyanese, a Haitian background, him being mostly from a Jamaican background, me having some experience because I lived in Jamaica, it just made us joking together easier. I could bust out in patois. He could, we could be in public and talking about things that we probably don't want other people to know what we're talking about because we're talking patois, like little stuff like that. And just overall, we enjoyed each other's company and we liked similar things. I really am a foodie, so my love for exploring food and all of that started out from the time I came to Toronto because we had so many options, and he would be a part of those experiences with me as well. What are some other things that I would say really helped our relationship to flourish and grow? Well, one of the biggest fears I would say I had from like dating, and this was with anyone pretty much, is that they would not be open minded or they would be like a bit ignorant when it came onto Haitian culture and just history and the people. Growing up in Jamaica, my experience was that I had moments when I was bullied by kids. There were mean things that were said to me because I had a Haitian background. And so I remembered in my head, I always wanted to make sure that whoever I would eventually date and hopefully marry would be someone who respected that side of my culture. And that was super important to me because my parents mean the world to me. And so that was like non negotiable. So I really appreciated that, like through the content that I was doing, especially on Instagram and TikTok, he was getting to learn a bit more about Haitian culture, Haitian history. Sometimes he would ask me questions. He was like genuinely curious. He's like, oh, I didn't know about that and this and that and etc. And he was very empathetic, I would say, when I talked about some of the experiences I had. So I really appreciated that about him. And that also allowed me to see that it is good to not judge a book by its cover in terms of like labeling an entire, someone based on an entire group in terms of what your experience was like with them. That also was a lesson for me. And I also like the fact that he was open to learning more about Haitian culture, not through the history, but through food and the language. So, one of the moments that I knew that he was the one, there were actually two moments. So, the first one was when I was hanging out with him over his house and he made ackee and saltfish. Now, this is ackee that he brought from home. And this was like the last of it. So if somebody first of all cook for you, but not only cook for you, but they cook the last of them favorite thing, so them rate you, like rate you. So it was the first moment. And it was really good ackee. So he captured my heart right there, so with the ackee and saltfish. The next moment was I wanted him to come with me to this Haitian restaurant that had just opened up in Toronto. I went with a couple of friends before by myself, and I was like, you know what, let's go to the restaurant. I have this dish in particular that I want you to try out. It was fried goat. And I remember I would always tell him about this fried goat. He's like, fried goat? I say, yes, man, fried goat. Just try it and you will see. So the exact order was banan pizza with pickles, fried goat on the side, marinade, all of that. And I remember how he loved it. He couldn't stop talking about. He's like, yo. I remember he called, like he was talking to some of his relatives on the phone one time. He's like, yo, someone try this thing at fried goat, but And I was like, just seeing his enthusiasm for like trying out something from Haitian cuisine, which is not often talked about enough. And as a Jamaican, you know how hardcore they are about their food. So that was beautiful to see as well. Another time is when it came onto the language. As y'all know, I've been on my journey of relearning Haitian Creole properly, and one of the apps I use to help me spell words is Duolingo. And anyone can basically learn the language. All you need to do is download the app, pick your language, and you can start. And I remember that he was trying at one point to like really impress my mom to like know how to say certain phrases to her. Both of my parents speak fluent English, by the way, but he wanted to be able to impress her by saying like, "How are you?" or "I am fine" in Haitian Creole. So he would download the app and do like his lessons every day. That was so funny and sweet to see. So there were just little moments along the way that made me realize, this person like wants to love me fully as myself. I can be myself around them. I didn't have to hide any parts of me. And that was just something that I found very beautiful. And shout out to God. That's all I can say. Um, Now, when it comes on to other things that we just related on and aligned on, or beliefs, systems, how we wanted to raise our children, um, or spirituality, both of us are, God fearing, we believe in God and all of that. Like, that was very important to me to have someone who was a believer. And I love the fact that he is someone who he respects the word and God and all of that. So yeah, little stuff like that. And then when it comes on to food, it's it's great that we share similar foods. Maybe they just have different names. And as someone who already grew up with Jamaican cuisine, I was not a foreigner to a lot of the foods. So I was able to then introduce him to some foods from my Guyanese background or my Haitian background. Which, by the way, I want to make a small plug. I recently started a series called Food is at Home, which is where I document and challenge myself to make foods that I grew up eating from my Guyanese, Haitian, and Jamaican background. And so from that series, he is also part of it where he grades how the food tastes based on the cooking skills of myself and just how he thinks it tastes overall. And we have done Haitian cremas, Jamaican rum cake, Guyanese pepper pot, and soup jumeau. So coming back with some more episodes very soon, but that is like something that we've been doing together, like cooking together at home, that we've been really loving, and I love having him a part of the show in that kind of way, or my channel in that kind of way. So yeah, go check it out. I'll link it in the description box below for you. So even though this is not a relationship based channel, I will say that one of the best advice I would want to give to anyone out there is go through your own dating journey the best way you see fit. We live in a society right now where everyone has their 2 cents of what women should or shouldn't do when it comes on to dating. Oh, the guy has to spend this amount of money on you to get a first date or whatever. Like, do what makes sense for you. As someone who is not materialistic, those things don't impress me, because someone can like shower you with all the gifts and things like that in the world, but then they don't truly appreciate you, or they treat you badly behind the scenes. I would prefer to be with someone who also has good character overall. One thing I really admired with my husband is that he doesn't just treat me well, but everyone around him, he also treats with kindness and consideration. And that is like just a great quality overall to have. So I was intentional with what I was looking for in a partner, what I think would make not only a good husband, but also what I would be looking in for someone to be the father of my children, because I do want to be a mother very soon. I don't know if I'm the only one who gets annoyed when I watch movies and people do this, but like people will be together for like years, and then they even go as far as to getting engaged, and then the topic of kids finally come up, and then one person doesn't want kids, and it's like, why wasn't this a conversation you guys had way before then? So before we even had started premarital counseling, there were certain things that we did talk about in great length. I know that I always wanted to be married first before I had children. That was a non-negotiable for me as well. And another non-negotiable was to make sure that we did premarital counseling. And I thank the Lord that we did that, because it allowed us to learn certain things about each other that we probably wouldn't have known had we not had a third party who was more unbiased to ask us the tough questions and have us have those difficult conversations with each other, so we really know where we stand and we can stay aligned on what our goals are for the future, because we're doing this thing called life together. I love the fact that we both give each other that safe space to do that and be that person for each other. Like, he's truly my best friend. I would like to think that I am also his best friend, because we talk about everything. But yes, it's been great. It's all I can say. And he is one of my biggest cheerleaders in everything that I do, not just as a content creator, but also career wise. I'll never forget when I got laid off a couple years ago. He held me down. He really held me down, and I yeah, I'm not gonna get mushy, so I'm going to kind of end off the video right here, is what I will say. Y'all kind of get the point. But anyways, I love love, and I love this for me. And I could talk about this for a long time, of course, but I don't want to ramble. I hope that the point of the video is definitely getting across. In a nutshell, no matter what relationship you're in, whether you're in an intercultural relationship or an interracial relationship, both of them are very similar in some kind of way, in that I think you have to be very self-aware of what your boundaries are, communicating and understanding what communicating actually means. Respect for each other's culture is very important as well. And so that's why in our household, similar to how I was raised, where my parents didn't make me feel like I had to choose one culture over the next, there was never a competition. That is the same way I operate in our household. We will embrace all of these three beautiful cultures equally. Of course, still being proud of our core culture, him being Jamaican, me being more Guyanese, Haitian. But at the end of the day, we are always going to respect our cultures. The diasporic war thing, there's no place for it in our household. Because when I do have my children, I want them to know that it is okay for them to embrace every part of where they come from culturally as well. Now, y'all, I'm curious to know if you have been in an intercultural relationship before, what are some of the challenges or adjustments you had to make in order to make the relationship work? Let us talk the things them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!